Hey everybody, Jackalope here. Well, it's been a day or so since the legendary Fidel Castro finally kicked the bucket, and Obama didn't have a single bad word to say about the guy. You know, in my early days of truck driving, I used to go to Miami, Florida, and I used to run upon a number of Cuban people. I've known, Cuban folks throughout the years. The Cuban people who fled who fled Cuba to go to Miami, Florida, or hit the states. Of course, Miami and Florida was, the closest body of land they could get to. I don't care if I worded that wrong. But anyway, uh, when you decide to leave your homeland in a boat, or a lot of them did in a makeshift raft, an old rowboat, and you got to go through at least 90 miles of shark infested waters. My first question is, what was so bad back home that you felt you had to leave? I was born in California, okay? I was born back in 1965. I'm 51 years old. And, I've lived different places. I've lived in California, of course, when I was in the Army. I went to basic training in New Jersey, AIT in Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland, permanent party at Fort Bragg. And other than, that, California, I've lived in Indiana for since the fall of '97. I lived in Ohio for a short amount of time before I came to Indiana. I've been to Indiana ever since. And, I can travel wherever I want to go. But what is so horrible in Cuba that people were willing to risk 90 miles of shark-infested waters? Now, Cuba is communist. And everybody knows these protests, bullshit protests, riots, whatever you want to call them, that have been going on since Donald Trump, was elected president of the United States, completely legit. And over in Seattle and Oregon and other places, you get all these crybaby, snot-nosed millennials and others, even older ones, that are out there going, wah, wah, wah. I think somebody ought to be out there handing out pacifiers, and baby wipes. Because they're nothing but a bunch of crybabies. Every presidential election I ever remember, whoever won. If our guy didn't win, we got up and went to work the next day. Oh, they need cry-ins, they need a cuddle dog. I'm like, what the hell happened here? What kind of crap is this? And so, I think about this. Okay, Fidel Castro is dead. And, I've run up on people on the internet, and YouTube in particular, praising Fidel Castro. Oh, Cuba's so wonderful. And I said, what's stopping you from going there? And then their first line of defense is, oh, you think we got all the money, we can just travel, blah, blah, blah. Hey, dipshit. Those people that keep showing up on the shores of Miami, Florida and whatnot? Do you think they had a lot of money to travel? Hell no. They got whatever scrap of wood they could, and they made a raft of some kind, and they just left. And they washed up wherever they washed up at. A lot of people didn't make it. Ever heard of Elian Gonzalez? You know how he was found? By a fisherman? His mama left Florida on a boat trying to get to the United States. And something happened out there on the high seas, and she drowned. And that little boy, 6 years old I think he was, 5 or 6, was found in an inner tube floating. And there was a big old fiasco about that. And, of course, that happened under Wild Bill Clinton's administration. And everything they did was done wrong. And the Cuban people of Miami, Florida, they formed a human chain around that house. They did not want them to take that little boy back to Cuba. And of course, they sent in, the goon squads, submachine guns and all that kind of stuff, and snatched the boy out of the, people's hands and took him back. If they would have did that the right way, that boy's father could have showed up on their doorstep and said, "I'm here for my son." Okay. Now, if they didn't want to turn him over to his father, then additional measures could have been made. Nah, but they don't want to do that. It's all about fear. The goon squads, okay? The goon squads. Now, Fidel Castro. You talk about a rotten bastard. Like I say, I've met people. I've known people over the years. A lady I knew when I was in the Army years ago. She was married to one of my fellow troops. Her family was from Cuba. And her family and her left like in 1961 or something like that, after Fidel Castro took over. And she was only like 5 or 6 years old. And they just, kind of bounced around all over the place until they end up on American shores. Her grandfather owned like 4 or 5 businesses. He lost them all. Those Cuban folks over there who had to live under Fidel Castro, that fled with the clothes on their back, a lot of times down in the people that I've met, they refuse to say his name. What they do is they do this. Like the stroking the long beard, because he had that long beard. They refuse to say his name. They just do that. When I first started doing line haul trucking, back in 1993, I used to go to Miami, Florida. I used to haul flowers years ago, floral. And there was a couple of guys that worked on the dock, a couple of Cuban guys. And one of them, Javier, he had recently got out of the military. He'd been an Army Ranger. He was from Cuba. And we got to talking one day, and, what made you decide to come here, all this kind of stuff. I didn't learn why he came to the United States, but when he came to the United States, after he became of age, first thing he did was go in the military. And he was in an in-rank inspection one time, and there was a general officer who was doing the inspection. I said, "Where are you from, son?" He said, "I'm from Cuba, sir." "Okay, what made you decide to come into the military, son?" He said, "Well, sir, that was my way of thanking this country for letting me be here." Good answer, son. Good answer. These little powder puffs can't understand that. These cream puffs, these crybabies, they're all going wham, 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 standing on the flag and stuff like that. This guy fled from a hellhole, came to the United States, and he went in the military. Became an airborne ranger. Now that's what that man was made out of. And I got all the respect for him. The other guy who worked on the dock was a real quiet feller named Frank. One day I asked him, I said, "So what made you decide to come to the States, Frank? Everybody's got a reason for wanting to do something. What was your reason? Why do you want to come to the States, Frank?" He said, "Well, when I was in Cuba, I was a farmer. I used to farm the land. One day I was out in my field plowing, and some of Fidel's guys came out to my property, and they had grease guns in their hands. For those of you that don't know what that is, that's a submachine gun. And they said, 'This is Fidel's land now, you have to leave.'" He goes, "Whoa, wait a minute." He goes, I farm this land, I work this land's mine." They said, "Look, you got 2 choices. You can either leave now or die where you stand." And I was forced to leave my property as is. So he said, me and a couple of my friends spent 3 days. We built the raft out on the shores, and we spent 3 days on a raft trying to get to the United States. He said that's the way it was in communist Cuba under Fidel Castro. And this is the guy, all these crybaby millennials, all these douchebags in college and the People's Republic of Berkeley and all that, and their so-called teachers, who as far as I'm concerned ain't nothing but a bunch of communist agents, who are going to be praising Fidel Castro now. After the Thanksgiving weekend break, they're going to go back to college, and their instructors are going to be praising Fidel Castro. I challenge anybody to go down to Florida or any place in this country, but Florida has a high concentration of people who came from Cuba. Go ask the people of Miami, Florida, Florida in general, the Cuban people who fled communist Cuba under Fidel Castro with the clothes on their back and makeshift rafts and boats. Ask them what they think about Fidel Castro. They have nothing but pure, unadulterated hatred for that son of a bitch. But I'm getting a little long here, and I got to get ready to go. So anyway, y'all take care, and we'll see how the media and the crybabies are going to play out Fidel Castro. He was nothing but a ruthless, brutal dictator. Okay? When you have to leave your homeland in the way that the Cuban people have for decades, that tells me that whoever's running the show is one dirty, nasty SOB. And I'm sure the people of Florida, the Cuban people who live in the United States, are now celebrating that he is finally gone. I'll talk to you again.